Hello and welcome to the Lifting the Iceberg podcast. My name is Tyler James Berger, and on this episode, I have a discussion with Patrick Carbajal on how we view parkour as our spiritual practice. Patrick is a parkour athlete and coach based out of Philly, and we became friends a few years back at a jam in Philadelphia when we discovered our similar interests in flow states, psychedelics, meditation, spirituality, and how these things intersect with our parkour practice. I've been so excited to release this conversation with Pat because I think he has great insight and thinks deeply about what parkour does for him on many levels and what it can do for so many others. So without any further ado, please welcome Patrick Carbajal. Pat, what's up, dude? How you doing?
What's up, Tyler? I'm doing pretty well. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to talk to you about the intersection between parkour and spirituality. I feel like it's an intersection that hasn't really been explored very in a very in-depth way, really, through a conversation like this. So I'm excited to just have this conversation and see how we view the connection between parkour and our spirituality. But spirituality is a word that is used by a bunch of different people in a bunch of different ways. And I feel that it is one of those words that we all use in a way where we think we all agree upon its meaning, but if you prod further, it seems that each person means something different when they say the word spiritual or when they say the word spirit. So my first question is, what does spirituality mean for you, and what is a spiritual practice?
Yeah, so I remember you bringing up the word spirit yesterday, and the first kind of word that came to mind was like energy. Like someone, if you notice someone's spirit that they bring to like a room or a conversation, it's their energy that they bring to the room or the conversation. In terms of spiritual practice, I like to think of it as someone's journey for self-discovery, and whatever that entails. Like that could be a spiritual or psychedelic journey, or a physical practice that pushes someone past what they thought they could do, and then through doing that they learn a fair amount about themselves, and then it's this kind of continuous cycle that they just continue to grow and grow the more they learn about themselves. And sometimes that journey, whether it's parkour or anything else, changes, and it drifts off to something else because their interest changes, and now they're following this new path that they have learned to love and want to pursue. So that to me is kind of my definition of spiritual practice. That's kind of what I envision as a spiritual practice.
Just like a path towards the form of development that we're all kind of looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like parkour is just, you can get to 4 by 2 plus 2, or 3 plus 1, or 2 times 2, or 6 minus 2. There's all different ways to get to the same outcome. Yep. And that's kind of what a spiritual practice is. But what is really, to you, like, what is that outcome? Like, what is it that you're aiming for? Because it seems that a spiritual practice has an aim, whether it be enlightenment or nirvana or heaven. Like, what, symbolically speaking, is the nirvana of the parkour practice?
I know. So if we take out the idea of it being a parkour practice and having there being an aim for a spiritual practice, the aim, to me, and then to some people, I believe, is just following their curiosity and what they are curious about. Like, to me, the curiosity that was in parkour was just it being an escape for me while I was in college, and kind of this space that I created for myself where I could eventually transition into being only inside my head and my environment and seeing what I could do in that space. That to me is kind of where that curiosity took me. And then it kind of led me to where I am today in terms of coaching it and kind of still training to this day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're at a limit with our language, and spirit, in a similar vein, kind of like the word love. We have this one word that seems to mean so many different things, and it's hard to completely use this word and feel like it's appropriate. But for me, spirit is the part of you that is conditioned by your human experience, the part of you that stays present throughout all of your growth and transformations in this lifetime and retains the benefits or scars or like the karmic baggage from your experience and potentially carries that into the next life in the form of karma. I guess that would just be one of my personal religious beliefs. I do kind of believe that there is a spirit, a substrate to a soul like that is somehow transcendent.
This essence to the person
An
that
essence
always
to
kind
the
of
person. Yeah.
like stays with them or.
Yeah. And I think that, so for me, a spiritual practice is anything that holds in the highest regard the development of your ability to experience life in such a way that benefits that deepest, most transcendent part of who you are, that essence of who you are. And a spiritual practice for me is both additive and subtractive, meaning that it is something that develops you and makes you more than what you are and brings you further towards your fullest potential. Yet it is also something that peels off the layers of cultural conditioning and ego that can hinder our mobility towards our potential. This is why the face of the Buddha is in both the baby and the old man, so there's this aspect to spiritual growth where you are deconditioning yourself as well as conditioning yourself. And parkour is my practice that provides both conditioning and deconditioning, both the additive and subtractive dimensions of spiritual growth. That's how I feel like it affects my spirit. The thing that stays with me in a transcendental way. I feel like parkour has a profound effect on that because parkour is always challenging us to decondition all of our preconceptions about the world. Something that I've learned from working with kids, very young kids. My youngest class that I teach, it's an adult child class with kids ages 9 months to 14 months old. So I have a lot of experience with pretty much trying to teach parkour to babies. But something that I've learned from working with these babies is that they're already doing parkour. They're practically already tripping. Everything is new. They're seeing the world as if they've never seen it before because they really have never seen it before. But something that I've noticed about babies is that they don't aspire to just sit still. You put a baby in a gym and it just wants to climb over things. It's testing its body's relationship to the environment and everything it sees. It doesn't think, oh, that's how that thing should be used. It's going, wow, this is cool. How can I approach this environment, this obstacle, in a way that will develop me? I think that's why they naturally climb.
Now imagine taking a 30-year-old man who works in an office and put him in the same gym environment. He's going to look around and have no idea. He's going to see a bench.
He's going to see chairs.
He's going to have no idea
desks.
where to start. He's going to look at that pull-up bar and just do pull-ups, or he's going to look at a wall and be like, I'm going to go around it. He's not going to see the opportunities that maybe we see, or just experiment the way that baby decides to experiment and just try and climb up it or go over it in this way, or just
because the adult already has preconceived notions on how things should be used. And in parkour, we are always putting ourselves in environments where we are looking at structures that have intended uses, and we're trying to see around those intended uses to kind of create our own our own possibilities,
our own path.
Parkour requires us to radically decondition our preconceptions about the physical world and our preconceptions about our own body. To see possibilities for parkour in your environment, you need to develop what's called the Parkour Eye, the ability to see your environment outside of those well-intended uses that we have all been taught to see. It's getting back to that psychedelic state of mind, that childlike state of mind wherein we see everything as if for the first time. So we aren't blinded by our assumptions about what we should do on a certain spot. This is how obstacles become opportunities. And it's not just that obstacles become opportunities, but it's that the environment around us, with all of its rigid and sanctioned uses, becomes a blank canvas for our imagination to spill onto. How we are told to behave by our society becomes the bar which we aim to transcend, you know? Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, we need to get back to, we need to decondition ourselves to see our environment in a completely new way. And putting so much attention towards the methods of deconditioning yourself has been a profound spiritual skill for me.
Yep.
Because we are taught so much throughout our lives, and a lot of it is very useful. You know, we inherit so much very important and crucial information from our culture, but sometimes our culture is flawed. I would say almost all the times, no matter what culture you're in, it's flawed. Mm-hmm. And you pick up those flaws as like the through the institutions, through your mother, father, teachers, preachers, and politicians. And you need to learn how to break those things so you can think for yourself. And in parkour, we're thinking for ourselves with our body. We're not letting our environment do our thinking for us.
Yeah, we're trying to see what we can do with this given space. And it's a healthy exercise in creativity to see what you can do with a simple wall or a simple set of handrails or a simple set of ledges. It really forces you to think differently, using these simple obstacles, and then through doing that, you really practice creativity. Like anyone who struggles with creativity, I think parkour is a good way to get to increase your own creativity. Obviously, you're going to have to struggle a little bit to kind of get better at your creativity, because the learning, like the initial learning phase of parkour, I would say is pretty difficult for most people. And I like to think that like once you get over that initial hump of like learning the basics, then you now have this set of skills to go from to exercise that creativity. Yeah. Because there's like this loading phase of skills that you just have to kind of get through to an extent, depending on your take on learning these skills. Because some person, you know, might see this super high level athlete and think, oh, I have to learn 20 different skills to start having fun with it. Or a person with a different mindset could learn like a Kong, or might even learn just a safety vault and be able to have like hours and hours of fun on a simple setup, depending on how they have framed the idea of having fun in parkour.
Yeah.
You know?
That's something we were talking about in the Uber on the way to Brooklyn Zoo yesterday. It's like, I said that parkour is kind of like, it's an art where your body is the paintbrush and your environment is the canvas. And each move you learn is like a bristle on the brush. And the more moves you learn, the more full your brush is, and the more complete of a picture you can paint. The more capacity you're giving your imagination, more of a capacity to express itself in the environment.
It's also more variety to work with in terms of painting that picture. You've got, like, you know, yes, you've got all these different bristles, but maybe you also have like different brushes.
Maybe each move is a different brush, rather. You know? Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And you know, to go back to kind of looking at the environment and our, like, parkour being a way of rebelling against society using this type of creative imagination that parkour requires. One of the videos that inspired me when I first started parkour, I started parkour in 2006. And back then, I mean, most of the clips on YouTube were David Bell clips. And one of the first clips I saw was a clip called Rush Hour. It was a BBC commercial starring David Bell. And I can't find it on the internet anymore. Yeah. BBC has copyright over it.
Dang,
so they just stripped it off the internet. One of the most influential 2-minute videos that I've ever seen in my life. I cannot find it on the internet to show other people.
It's too influential.
It's too influential. Yeah. They don't want us to be woke.
Yeah. Trying to censor us.
Yeah. So in Rush Hour, so David Bell he's sitting in his office with his suit and tie and all like put up in his work clothes, and then he takes off his shirt, does the whole shirtless David Bell thing, climbs out the window of his office, goes to the rooftop, and then starts making his way home by running on the rooftops, doing, I guess, the pop culture conception of what parkour is, but in the most epic way possible. And it cuts to scenes of looking at the traffic in the streets, just like the traffic jams and people in their black and white suits and their briefcases.
The mundane day-to-day stuff.
The mundane day-to-day stuff that makes you feel like you're just a cog, a gear in this machine that is all moving in this sanctioned way. And then the camera tilted up to see David Bell like go from building to building and move in all of these ways that were so not sanctioned by the society, and then he makes his way home. And for me, that clip, it spoke immediately to the transcendent quality of parkour, where it's one of the most liberating physical practices because you are transcending the societal structure with your body. You're rebelling against the environment that has all of its influences on you. It wants you to walk on these flat surfaces that are made for us to walk on sidewalks, on stairs, on escalators, on elevators. We're not given any place for us to exercise our ability to find new paths. Yeah. And David Bell was just like making his own path home to transcend the mundane existence of all these other people. And that for me spoke to the transcendent quality of parkour.
Yeah, I agree. I think like there's this expectation from everyone that's walking down the street that like you have to walk down this handicap ramp the usual way, and that anytime you see like one of us, any parkour athlete or parkour practitioner using it in a different way, you get a mix of people that you get a mix of responses. You get the person that stops and yells at you and thinks that you're going to hurt yourself and is scared for maybe your safety, but at the same time feels slightly worried for themselves because you're doing this different radical thing that they've never seen before.
It's so outside of what they've
so different with. Yeah, and or you get the person that walks by and just like watches for a little bit and then continues on with their day, or
take out their phone and film you,
or films you and like, hey, can you do that again for my Snapchat? And sometimes I'm like, sure, why not? Other times I'm like, no, I don't really want to. Or you get the person that screams out, do a backflip, and then you're just like, no, thank you, and then they feel offended for some reason. But like, I'm like, if I refuse to do a backflip for you, like it's for a good reason. Like I'm not your performance monkey. I'm doing this for myself, not for you. Like maybe if you ask in a nicer way, like maybe I'll show you what like I can do. Or you get the person that genuinely walks up to you and asks you a question as to why you're doing it, and then that's when the conversation opens up about like what parkour actually is, and maybe you're able to in that moment kind of distill some kind of new information to them about the potential transformative qualities of parkour.
Yeah, and you learn a lot about what parkour is by watching the ways other people perceive you doing parkour. And what's been really interesting for me is seeing the stark contrast between how kids react when they see me doing parkour versus adults.
Yeah.
Like, I've been training outside in the city before where I'm doing like a pretty big jump or like something very technical, or like maybe I'm throwing some acrobatics in there. Either way, whatever I'm doing, it's something that you don't see someone doing on your normal walk home from work. And even though a lot of adults will just walk by and not even do a double take, they'll like see me do what I'm doing, this thing that they definitely have never seen anyone else do in that spot before. And it's not even pulling them out of their adaptive comfort zone at all. They're just in their reality tunnel, and they're not even open to being broken from that. Yeah. But kids, they don't have these structured reality tunnels that if you do parkour around a kid, they're like, whoa, mom, look at that. Whoa, that's crazy. Because they're open to having their minds blown. They're not already formed and decided on how things should be. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons like I love training in quote unquote public around people for a lot of reasons. Yeah. One of those reasons is I'm so certain that I have blown the minds of like probably hundreds of kids who have seen me do parkour in the streets, you know. And it's kind of like what Danny Ilibaka, he spoke about what influenced him to do parkour is he saw a guy do a wall flip in the street, and it hinted to him that there's more possible for his body. Yeah. There's more possible for this life. You know, you don't have to use a wall in the way that walls are meant to be used. Yeah. Sometimes you can hit a backflip off of it. Yep. And imagine if Danny Ilibaka never saw that guy do a wall flip. You know,
he would have been the same average Joe that you see walking down the street.
Yeah.
I like to think that anyone who feels stuck in a rut to some extent and they feel like nothing's possible for them, I think parkour is a healthy practice to pick up, not in the extreme sense where you're going to be doing like 20-foot gaps or jumping 2 bars or anything like that, but the challenge aspect of it, in that you're always trying to find something that you don't think you can do, something that's impossible for you to do, and then being able to break that down into progressible steps or actionable steps that you can take to then achieve that impossible outcome. Yeah. And I think that framework for achieving an impossible skill translates so well over to like other life goals that you have for yourself. And I think that is parkour as a practice that can help people get unstuck if they feel stuck in their day-to-day life, because it's training them in this specific way to achieve the impossible, but then that translates over to everything else in their life if they apply that same framework to the rest of their life. It's
like parkour will teach you a philosophy that transcends parkour, and a broader philosophy on how to set goals and achieve those goals, and how to get better at setting goals that you couldn't have even conceptualized before. You know, because in parkour we're always pushing into new territory, like literally and psychologically. You know, we're finding new environments, but we're also constantly finding new possibilities for our movement. And you know, in parkour, I think that out of almost all movement practices, parkour, with the exception of like gymnastics, parkour athletes are pushing the potential of what is possible for a human body. You know, I feel like parkour practitioners are doing movements that no person in the history of our species has ever done. And how do you break that threshold of doing something that no one has ever done before? You need to develop your vision. You need to develop your imagination to the point where you can visualize yourself doing something that the human nervous system has never moved through. Yeah. And that takes, again, this deconditioning of what's possible so you can set that transcendent, huge goal and develop those sub goals to get there.
Yep.
You know?
And then it's also like a practice in getting to know yourself a little bit more as well. Because like some people might enjoy, you know, swinging on a bar. Some people might enjoy flipping more. But it's through practicing all of these skills that you then start to ask yourself, okay, what exactly do I find joy in doing? And what am I scared of doing? And why am I scared of doing that?
Yeah.
And then it's like you ask yourself these questions and then you get answers back if you act on those questions. And then now you've got this better understanding of yourself as a person. And then that helps move you forward in other life pursuits that you have, because now you've got this better picture of yourself in this one aspect of parkour.
Yeah.
But again, it's that same framework that can be applied to everything else. Like it ties back to the whole self-discovery idea, where it's like, if you're stuck, if you don't know what you like, if you don't even know who you are necessarily, it's like do something hard, difficult, and challenging and see how you perform through it, and you'll learn so much about yourself, and then you'll be able to take that into almost anything else you do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that in parkour, the obstacle, exactly what you're saying, the obstacle becomes the sacred mirror. You know, the obstacle becomes the way in which we reflect on ourselves that jumpstarts our own development. And it's funny, like, I think that when I see parkour athletes, I see that tracers are a reflection of their environment, because they use their environment to reflect on themselves. And what I mean by that is, when I watch Oleg Vorslav move, I see just insanely technical bar work, and all of these movements that I can just, in a lot of his early videos, he shows this spot that he must have had by his house, this insane, the blue bar setup that is like, I think it's been reproduced. It's such an epic bar setup that it's been reproduced at different parkour gyms around the world. And you just see when Oleg Vorslav goes to a completely separate part of the world in a new environment, you can see in the way he's moving, the environment in which he like came up in.
And it's almost like a reflection of who he is as a person. Like, like depending on the athlete you see, the way they move about a space tells a lot about that athlete as a person. Yeah. And like the movements they choose to like identify, it speaks to what they see naturally in any spot, or just naturally out in the world. Yeah. But you don't like it takes multiple sessions outside of like warming up to a spot to be able to kind of have that kind of specific type of movement that you identify in that spot. Because at least at first for me, whenever I started training outside, like it would take me probably a good half hour to warm up to training outside, like to get over the initial like self-judgment that I would kind of notice that I would think other people are imposing on me. But once I got over that, it was like I was in a whole different world, and I wasn't judging what I was seeing. I was just trying something and then seeing how it worked, and then if it was fun, I would do it again, and if I wanted to add something onto it, I would. And it's through doing that you really start to identify what you enjoy in your movement, and then your movement starts to reflect you as a person.
I think it's really crazy in parkour where I've seen, like, obviously I've seen hundreds of parkour videos, and it's really interesting for me when you see a parkour video and it's a very zoomed out frame of an athlete doing like a run or something, where it's too low resolution to see their face at all.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really, it just looks like the form of a person.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I see that person and I'll just be like, oh, I know that's Danny Ilibaka. Yeah. I know that's Oleg. I know that's Pasha.
How they're moving.
Just on how they're moving. And with parkour athletes at a particular level, I think actually all parkour athletes, they all move in a different way. I move like Tyler James Berger. You move like Pat Carbajal. We all have our fingerprint of movement. And in that fingerprint is the window into who you are. Yeah. It's the window onto your individuality. And in parkour, that's why I think parkour is such a great thing for developing your individuality, because it requires the full development of your potential of who you are individually as an
I feel like
athlete.
to an extent it requires a certain amount of courage to put yourself out in public and to move in a different way than most people have seen you move, and through exercising some form of that courage, like, you gain some of your personality, because now you know how you are in this public situation, and it's like little by little after each session you kind of gain a new piece of information as to who you might be or want to become as an athlete, as a person.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, in parkour, there's the key aspect in parkour for me is the solitude of our training. I feel like each parkour athlete is on their own unique path. Like, we might be on teams here and there, or like clans, or just kind of group trainings and jams. But when I go to a jam, I don't necessarily see people training together in the normal sense. I see a bunch of people training alone together. Yeah. It just in proximity with each other. Yeah. And I think that this solitude that is necessary for development in parkour is so symmetrical to the kind of solitude that exists in many spiritual practices. You can't have a spiritual experience with someone, so to speak, because your conscious experience is only in your head, and I think that parkour requires the same kind of solitude that is necessary for the psychedelic experience. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why psychedelics have been so in alignment with who I am as a person, is because I'm very, very good at being alone and doing things that develop who I am by myself. I'm not a team. I'm a team player but I prefer to be alone. But I of course I am someone who can be in community and sees the value in community. But for me, like in parkour, it's my own practice, and the only way I get better is by going tunnel vision into my own state, where it's just me versus the environment. And the environment is just a reflection of me. So really it's just me and another reflection of myself. And I think that that's one of the reasons why that's one of the spiritual dimensions of parkour for me, is the way in which it develops your capacity to be alone. Because solitude, fertile solitude, is the most important thing in all these spiritual practices, because you need to become very comfortable with being alone. And that's something that Daniel Gilbert found with people who were learning how to meditate, or just people who are learning how to be alone. Like, most people can't be in a room by themselves and just sit quietly for more than 5 minutes before they start like finding things to distract them.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that in parkour, the intense focus that is required in those states of solitude helps develop your ability to just be happy by yourself, to not need these external social distractions that brings you out of your own head. It's almost like some people are very uncomfortable with sensory deprivation tanks because you're the most isolated that you could be. You're just floating in void material pretty much, and you're as alone as you can possibly experience solitude and aloneness. And I think there's something very similar to parkour there.
Have you ever been in a sensory deprivation tank?
Yeah,
before?
I have.
Yeah. How many times have you been in one?
I think about 5 times at this point. Yeah.
I think I'm around like 5 as well. There's like a place that's near to where I live.
Halcyon?
Halcyon. Yeah. That's where I've been trying to go recently. How has it been for you personally? Because I know like with me, I haven't had like any grandiose like spiritual experiences through it, but I enjoy the solitude that it brings because it really like you said, it takes out any external distractions, and I can really think about a specific problem that I'm having and maybe get a better kind of understanding of it. Yeah. For me, I think it's weird. When I first started to do floating, I would go in with a specific intention, and I think I wasn't necessarily thinking about intention in the correct way. I was thinking about intention as in, this is something that I'm going to keep in the front of my mind throughout this whole experience, and I'm somehow going to ask a question and get an answer. But what I've found with floating is that it puts you, I was going to use like you terms, but it's different for everyone. So I'll just speak for my own experience. It puts me into a dream state where I just kind of step outside of myself and I let go of any kind of intention that I have for my experience, and I let that dreaming part of my mind manifest into kind of what's called the hypnagogic state, that state you're in like right before you fall asleep, or the hypnopompic state is like just when you wake up and you're still kind of dreaming. I think that dreams are the way in which your subconscious mind speaks to your conscious mind. There's some research that shows that dreaming is actually the way your right brain communicates information to your left brain through the corpus callosum connection. So I think that being in a sensory deprivation tank puts me into a dream state where then after the fact, I analyze the dream experiences, and where putting the intention comes in. The intention is more of just like a program that I like kind of drop into my biocomputer that stays present, even though I don't have to consciously hold it in my mind. I'm not trying to like figure out problems in there. It like maybe sets the tone of the dream, but doesn't like take control or hold it in place. It just like maybe affects it in some small way.
But at the same time, I have tried, I heard Joe Rogan talk about how he would go into the tank and visualize jiu-jitsu movements in there. And I have done that with parkour because visualization is a crucial aspect in parkour. You can't do a move that you can't see yourself do in your own mind. You need to be able to visualize it first.
I feel like I should do that with giants in parkour. I should go to the tank and just visualize myself doing a giant and then try and...
Well, with giants, it's funny because there's a part of the giant that you literally can't visualize because your body has never done that movement before. You have to, it's like you can't, it's like mapping darkness.
Yeah.
And it's that point where you're swinging up, you do your cast swing, and you're swinging up, and you get to that 45-degree angle where your feet are raised above the bar.
Yeah.
You're not doing a lache. You're
Yeah.
not letting go. You're holding on, and you're going for that ride. And that point, that just like the 90 degrees from swinging up into that handstand, that's the part for me learning giants, because giants were a big obstacle for me. That was the part where no matter how much I visualized it, I just had to kind of have some trust and let Jesus take the wheel and just swing into it. And then after you put your body through that motion, then your nervous system has had the ability to map that experience. And then from there, after you do it, that's when visualization matters, because after the first time I did a giant, I went home and I just thought about doing giants for like the rest of the night, because I wanted to solidify and make concrete my mind's perception, my mind's ability to see me do a giant in my own head, because that's what you need if you're gonna, keep that movement.
Oh, I think because I know we wanted to talk about flow states, and I think do you think, I mean, you probably do agree with this, but do you think both flow states and spiritual practices or experiences go hand in hand? Like,
yeah, I do. And we were talking about this yesterday, how
like one can't be without the other. They both necessarily come together.
And
the flow state kind of, it like this, the spiritual practice gives you insight into yourself, but the flow state itself also gives you insight as to, like, in terms of and for I don't know who's listening who aren't too familiar with flow states, but they're this state of mind that you enter in where you feel your best, you perform your best, and through entering into that state, occasionally there is this novel dump of information that you receive after having gone through that state. Whether it's you executing, like in this case, in this case, maybe a very, very scary giant. The things that put you into the flow state are, like high risk triggers, whether that be like physical risks or social risks. But through going through that, you receive more information, a lot of information at times about what you can do or what you enjoy or what you want to do. So yeah, I think flow states and spiritual practices both go hand in hand.
For sure. And in my experience, the thing that connects the flow state with what I would consider is the spiritual experience is the quality of ego loss, of ego dissolution. Because in a flow state, when I'm really in the flow and doing parkour, I'm not Tyler Berger anymore. I don't necessarily have a pronounced sense of self, especially in a moment where you're on that edge of doing, of pushing your potential, on the edge between yin and yang, between order and chaos. You lose your sense of self. And I think that that's necessary to kind of become a passenger in your body's mapping of new realities.
It's kind of a relief to some extent, because, like, everyone who walks around these streets are always in their own heads and always like judging themselves and always telling themselves they should be doing this or should be doing that. But that, like you said, that moment of like stepping outside of yourself and not really judging what you're doing, it's liberating, and it's also rejuvenating at the same time. And it puts you in a much better place to continue on with like your 9-to-5 job or whatever job it is you go back to. And I think it's necessary, and I think most people don't seek out flow, whether it be in their work or in their personal like extracurricular activities. Because
the flow state is like, when you're in the flow state, that's when you're connected with your spirit in a way, I feel. And, when have you experienced flow states in your parkour practice? What are some like specific examples of you experiencing the flow state and stepping aside from your own consciousness?
Yeah, so in terms of specific example, I remember when me and two of my other friends took a trip down to Florida, Orlando, Florida, and there was a specific like really scary pipe cat that we were trying to do. One of my good friends, Andy Taylor, like showed it to us, and he was kind of our guide throughout the trip. He was showing us all these scary challenges. Most of them we could not do, but there was this one that I encountered that like I was scared of, and the first day that I saw it, I was like, heck no, I cannot do this thing. This is terrifying. It's like 3 stories off the ground. It's a decently sized thick pipe where you could fit your hands around it, but the jump to it is the thing that's very deceptive because of the height. You feel like you can't make the cat, or you can't make the cat leap. But the next day, it was like a day or two later when we came back to it, I just remember like stepping in front of it, looking at it, and then being like, no. And then I step back, and then I come back to it, walk up to the edge. I look down at the floor, and then I look up at it. And then I just remember the feeling of the fear that I had kind of just start to dissolve away. And then I just remember my focus just like laser focus at the cat. And I just remember like not being in control of my body. I just remember looking at it and being like, I could do this. And then I just remember breathing in, out, and it's 3, 2, 1, and then I jump and I make it, and I'm there, and I'm like, wow, that was really easy. And then I shimmy myself down, and like everyone's looking at me like, whoa, and then everyone's like congratulating me, and I'm like surprised that I just made it. And it was weird because it really felt like something almost like took over me, and I was just executing what my body knew it could do. Yeah. And the fear that was there just went away the minute I don't know at what moment I let go, but there was a moment of letting go, and it was just, just executing the move that was needed to get to that wall.
Just getting out of your own way.
Yeah. And then so that was like a specific example, but just even in multiple solo sessions when I'm outside training, like at first the like, yes, there's the physical risks that are there that help kind of put me into the flow state in terms of like the challenge that I'm doing, but it's that combined with the initial buffering period of the social risk that's there because there's other people there and other people like looking by and judging me, and I'm a person to an extent that kind of cares a lot about what people think about me to an extent. It's a bad trait that I have, but it's one that I'm working on, obviously through parkour. And it's those two kind of paired together where the minute I find a really, really fun and exciting challenge, I lose track of what time it is, and I'm just there in the challenge, and whether I'm listening to music, I'm like having fun, jamming out, and then by the time before I know it, like 2 hours have gone by, and I'm like, oh wow, cool, that was really fun. And then I'm back at home, and I'm stretching or whatever it is, watching YouTube, chilling out. So those are this is why I think solo training in public is so important to people training parkour, because like you're not able to fully get a grasp on what you like to do or what you enjoy to do without that kind of I don't know, that social risk that's there paired with that physical risk. Like parkour for me when I first started was exercising the ability to not care what people think about me. And I think I don't want that to get lost from people starting out training inside gyms. Like, yes, you can go outside and train with people in your gym, but people really need to try and get out at least for like an hour or a half hour just by themselves, just to see how they feel, just to see like what they come up with. I think that's really important. I think that's a part of parkour that I hope is never lost, and I hope that everyone keeps with them throughout their practice.
Like getting into that solitary
Yep.
state of mind.
Yep, and just being okay with being by yourself.
Well, I think that, again, going back to the whole solitude thing, that's where my most creative movement comes from.
Yeah.
You know, just from being at the playground. There was a amazing wooden playground by my house where I've done most of my training throughout my life. And it was just my most creative movements came from me being alone at the playground, just exploring what's possible and just like letting my imagination do like crazy things all over my environment.
Did you ever try to listen to music and do parkour at the same time, and then try and land a jump on like the beat of a song? Have you ever tried to do that?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So it's like so much fun, but at the same time, like the worst thing to do, because if you're offbeat at all, like you're messing up the jump, and you're just like the whole mood is screwed up, and you're just like, damn it, I should have never done that. And it's like,
and that's why, do you look at training parkour as a meditation? A, do you have a meditation practice? B, is training parkour ever a meditation for you?
Yeah, so I do have a meditation practice. I do I have been trying to meditate in the morning, right after I wake up. It's been a thing that it's been falling off of my daily routine recently, and I gotta try and get back on it. Yeah. But in terms of parkour, for me as a meditative practice, I see it as a meditative practice, but I don't think I consider it as like, I don't think I could just leave it as a meditative practice and then also not meditate on top of it.
Yeah, it's a different type of meditation.
It's a different type, and I think in terms of it being meditative, I think it's more so of an exercise in just creativity and an exercise in getting slightly uncomfortable with yourself every now and then, because I think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. You know, in terms of like being comfortable 24/7, that's not a good thing it's not a good place to be for the rest of your life. I think, you know, getting uncomfortable every now and then is good, because it, you know, changes things up and makes you question things every now and then. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think, in terms of it being a meditative practice, for me, it's a creative practice, and it helps get me uncomfortable every now and then, just so I can
step out of your comfort zone and grow. Yeah, because we grow outside of our comfort zone, and then we expand our comfort zone into the unknown. Yep. Yeah, and you know, on the topic of like having multiple practices, something I've experienced in both parkour and my spiritual path is that in parkour, it seems like there's a huge emphasis on finding the other things in other practices that work in order for them to be incorporated into your parkour practice. And on my spiritual path, a perspective that I try to look through is the perennial perspective, the perspective of the perennial philosophy, which is a book by Aldous Huxley, where he looks at and analyzes different lessons and truths that keep manifesting in religious traditions that are separated by space and time. It seems like there are these fundamental substrates to these different philosophies that just seem to be so true that people just keep returning to them. And in parkour, I've noticed a lot of parkour athletes don't just do parkour. Like, it's different than other movement practices, where when you meet a parkour athlete, I can guarantee you they've at least done or seriously looked into at least two other separate parkour practices, where like you'll meet a parkour athlete and they know a little bit from capoeira, they know a little bit from breakdancing, they do yoga, they might do pole dancing, they might do juggling. You know, I know that's another movement practice that you have. And I think that parkour, in a way, for me, parkour is my perennial movement philosophy. It's the movement philosophy that it is under every other kind of movement philosophy that I've learned. Like I've dabbled in capoeira myself and gymnastics as well.
Yeah. And it's the place where all those ideas can kind of come together
and rest on
or make new ideas from it.
Yeah, exactly. And I treat that in the same way that I treat spiritual teachings. Like I read things from as many different religions as I can, because I think that there's something in each religion that you can take from that is useful. I treat religious writings and spiritual teachings, as well as different movement practices, like with parkour, as I would treat like a buffet line. I take what I want, I take what's useful, and I just leave the rest.
Yeah.
You know, what movement practices have you kind of pursued that have had an effect on your parkour practice?
I think all of the other sports that I've done have definitely just strengthened my parkour practice in general. Like my movement background or my sports background, I grew up playing soccer most of my entire life, and then once I went into high school, I still continued to play soccer, but kind of practiced less of it, and then got into swimming, and then into rowing. And you know, if you're familiar with like swimming and rowing, both very, very intensive sports and really kind of get you strong and in shape. And I think like those sports in particular, that paired with soccer, really put my body in a prime shape to take on the basic skills of parkour.
Yeah.
And then just from there, like I was able to take the basics pretty quickly, and then just run with them and try and play with them as much as I can. And I think one thing that you pointed out at Brooklyn Zoo the other night is that I really like the technical footwork challenges.
Yeah.
And I think that stems from like the technical touch you have to have with a soccer ball, and like in terms of like, you know, playing with it and juggling with it. I think that's where that kind of stems from.
Do
and
you do hacky sack?
I did not hacky sack, but I was able to juggle a soccer ball pretty well, and just like, you know, passing it and just like, you know, the touch you have with like the balls of your feet on it. I think that kind of touch really I enjoyed, but I think I enjoy more in parkour in terms of, you know, really technical foot placement challenges. And I think that's where my inclination to that kind of type of challenge definitely comes from my background as a soccer player.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
And you know, well, for me, I never really did anything before I started parkour. I never really did any sports. I just like was the weird kid who like climbed things. And I also just didn't like team sports. I wasn't I did some biking, but basically my entire athletic history, I started parkour when I was 12. You know, parkour has always been the main thing in my life. So I don't really have the ability to have a perspective of like having done things in the past and then getting to parkour and seeing how the things I've done in the past have amplified my parkour practice. But I have experience with already having done parkour and then coming to new movement practices and then seeing how it informs my development. And one of those things that I know we both share is juggling. You know, I first learned how to juggle in high school, and I just became obsessed with like learning how to juggle, because I found out that learning how to juggle actually grows the part of your brain that is responsible for your kinesthetic awareness by 3%. Not that it gets more volume, but it gets more creases and more connections. And I just thought, wow, if juggling can do that to your brain, there's no way that that doesn't somehow transfer to your parkour practice. And I feel like juggling has certainly helped my fast twitch movement in my arms, which is really good for some wall challenges, because not all wall runs are just running up to a ledge. Sometimes you're running up to a hole in a brick wall that you can fit one hand into, that you can kind of guide your momentum up and diagonally to get to the ledge that you actually want to get to.
And where the juggling helps with that, I believe, is like as the balls are flying through the air, you have to both track it with your peripheral vision and your hand. And it's the same idea like with the wall run challenge. Just explain, as you're rising up that wall, that space in that wall is now moving, and you have to be able to track it and then also find that spot with your hand.
Yeah, you're coordinating your limbs, and parkour, that's what it's all about. Especially in that same hypothetical wall run, there could be like, in order to get to that highest ledge, that ultimate goal, there might be one like hand placement for your hand, one like rough spot on the wall that will have the best grip for your foot. But in order to utilize those two things to your advantage to get to that highest ledge, you need to do some serious work, like bounce off that spot that your foot can kick off of, pull up and push out off that hole that your hand can go in, and then bring both your hands together to grab that top ledge. And juggling, especially if you start juggling using your feet, like I've seen people who may juggle hacky sacks, because that's something that'll actually sit on your foot, juggling and then getting it to like land on the top of your foot and then kicking it back up. It's a way of developing your body's ability to use all of its limbs in coordination with each other.
One of the group drills I saw in one of Max Henry's recent like workshops is it's like a giant circle of people, and they're both throwing a ball around to each other. And at the same time, there's a soccer ball on the floor, and they're passing it around.
Oh, that's awesome!
So it's practicing both, like hand coordination and foot coordination at the same time, and practicing like the reaction to, because you don't know like where that person's going to throw the ball, so you just always have to be ready for it, and then also a ball at your feet at the same time. Yeah,
it's like you have to give each limb its own brain.
Shout out to Max Henry for coming up with an awesome drill.
Awesome, I'll check that out. Yeah. And this gets back to parkour is both a deconditioning and conditioning exercise for me, and this speaks to the aspect, the conditioning element, because you do have to condition your body to do these movements. You're not necessarily born being able to do this. You're born with a certain perspective that allows you to get into that creative parkour mindset, but you need to condition your nervous system to be prepared to move through your environment like this.
Preparing yourself for a jump that you want to do.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like you got to put in the work or the homework to accomplish this challenge, because if you don't, you're gonna pay for it in some way.
You gotta program your biocomputer. And something else I wanted to get to in this podcast is the intersection between parkour and travel, and how traveling seems to become a spiritual aspect of being a parkour practitioner. We all romanticize expanding our environments, because I think that as a parkour practitioner, as a tracer, expanding our environment is the way in which we expand our minds. I think that going to a new environment allows us to find new possibilities and exercise our imagination, and that's why so many people in parkour are always desiring to go to different countries and find new environments to explore in. So what is your perspective on the intersection between parkour and the desire to travel that tends to come with it?
Yeah, I think it naturally stems from the idea to explore your immediate environment and to see what you can do in it. Yeah. And then once you've kind of, explored your environment enough, the natural inclination is just to go outside of your immediate environment. So whether that be the next town over or the next state over.
So you can get new challenges to keep growing.
Exactly. And just, kind of see how putting yourself in a new space and then seeing what you can come up with in that new space. Yeah. Now, in my personal experience from traveling, I know the first trip that I mentioned when I went to Orlando, Florida, was a awesomely amazing trip that I am 100% grateful for. It was very, very challenging, but at the end, I was able to accomplish a good amount of challenges and was able to come back with, you know, a lot of new insights. But then I noticed, and at least for myself, like I wanted to travel more, and you know, the next trip I went to was like out in Colorado. But then I remember noticing, like I kept trying to look and feel for that same experience that I went to in Orlando, Florida, and I wasn't getting that when I was in Colorado. And I remember noticing that when I came back, like it was almost like I was trying to get away from my day-to-day experience, and almost like I was trying to escape from my day-to-day experience. And it was a nice escape, but then when I came back, I was like, oh, there's all this other, you know, stuff that I still have to deal with. And it's like I noticed that I couldn't fully enjoy the experience of travel if I haven't fully solidified my responsibilities back at home.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what I remember clearly noticing and being like, oh, okay, so I have to do the homework at home first before I can fully enjoy, you know, maybe a nice vacation or trip to this other country or whatever.
Yeah, it's like don't move to a bigger fishbowl until you've grown to the one that you're already in.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's what I remember distinctly realizing and noticing, and that's been huge, at least for my kind of personal development, because like, you know, it's nice to take a vacation every now and then, but in terms of whether you deserve it or not, it's up to however much work you've put in at the moment. Like it's nice to indulge every now and then in like a trip here and there, but if the bulk of what you're doing is traveling and not really taking care of what needs to be done at home, you're not really going to fully enjoy the experience, because you've got all this stuff in the back of your head telling you it's like, oh, there's still work that needs to be done at home. Yeah. You know? And traveling is an investment. You know, it's expensive. So you want to make sure that when you are traveling, you're getting the maximum benefit from it as possible. Yeah, exactly. And you're not going to maximize the benefits you get from going to a new place until you have kind of transcended the environment that you're already in back at home. You know, you're not really stretching yourself as much as you possibly could if you haven't already mastered your home territory. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So something else that I wanted to bring up is another thing that parkour taught me is how my beliefs affect my reality, the relationship between belief and reality. Because when you're doing parkour, you need to believe that you're capable of doing something before you do it, or else you're not going to land that jump. Yeah, it's like, or you can get hurt. Or you can get hurt. Like you should not be throwing things that you don't believe that you can do. Yep. But that has taught me so much, because if sometimes you need to hack your belief and trick yourself into believing that you can do something in order to either do it or get very close to doing it, in order to get very close to achieving that goal. And that kind of comes back into like the whole flow state discussion, in terms of how the state of mind you get into when you're doing parkour. It's like it takes complete singularity in your belief in order to execute a movement. And that has been a really influential way that parkour has changed the way I view my reality, and the way I view how my beliefs dictate my reality. It's giving yourself like actionable or like physical progressions, so that you can see that outcome and be like, oh yeah, okay, I can make this distance. And then it's like, okay, well, can I make it accurately? And then you maybe find like a rail to jump on, and then you test your foot accuracy that day and how it's feeling. I remember there was one particular jump that I was doing in Philly, where like I wasn't sure, it was to a railing, and it was a level running precision to the rail, and I had to hurdle over a wall to kind of get the distance to get there. And I wasn't sure if I was going to make it accurately with my feet. So what I did was I literally just kind of walked around on the hand railings that were nearby and did a few practice jumps. And I noticed that every single time I stepped on that rail, my foot landed on the ball of my foot. And that to me reassured the accuracy that I had in that day, in that moment.
Yeah.
And then that to me told me that it was safe enough for me to try this jump.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of distance, I knew I could make it, but I was unsure about the accuracy of my foot placement. So I just walked around on some rails, did some test jumps. And I knew if I like healed any of those jumps, if I arched any of those jumps, it would have been like, nope, cannot do this. It would not be a good idea for me to do it. But every single touch felt good. And I just knew that the last thing to do was just to, give the good old 3, 2, 1, and then just commit to the jump. So
do you have any like send rituals? Do you have any like little practices that you do right before you are about to execute a move?
Yeah, so lately what I've been doing is just a simple, like shoe wipe. So like wipe each foot, nothing too excessive where I'm just like wiping for 20 minutes straight, just one shoe wipe on each foot. And then it's a big deep breath in and then a big deep breath out. And normally I try and make sure that when I take that big deep breath, I breathe all the way down into my diaphragm and then I exhale out.
Yeah.
Because
exhale everything
out. Yes, because I remember hearing from, I think it was either Jamie Wheal or Stephen Kotler, that whenever you are stressed or worried, your breath tends to stay up in your upper part of your chest, and that's where like the anxiety and stress stays. And if you breathe into the lower part of your diaphragm, that tells your body that it's okay and it relaxes a little bit. Yeah. And I think that helps in the letting go aspect right before you do a jump. So like really exhaling all of it out and then having a consistent 3, 2, 1 countdown, I think is important too, because if you exhale and you're like 3, 2, 1, and if you're shaky in that countdown, that should tell you that the jump itself is probably going to be shaky. Yeah. It's got to be a smooth inhale, smooth exhale, and then a nice consistent
3, 2, 1,
and then go. Yeah. And then you're there in the moment of the jump, and all that's left to do is just execute however best you've prepared yourself.
It's almost
for that
like
moment.
Hypnotizing yourself.
Yeah.
It is hypnotizing
it
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, because I remember Stephen Kotler, I think, wrote an article about high performance routines, and some I think it was a skier or a snowboarder where right before a big snowboard down a mountain, what he does is, like the day before, he doesn't wash like his underwear, and he wears the same underwear the next day as just like a thing to I don't know. It's one aspect of the, I don't know, the environment or of himself that he feels he can exercise control over, and then that lowers somewhat of his anxiety. Or this other skier, has to eat like a green apple right before he does a run down a mountain, and like the taste of the apple and then the sensation of biting into it
triggers the mindset,
and it's something that he can physically control. Another thing is like, I've heard that, or when I read it, it's like, he clicks his ski poles 2 times and then maybe gives himself a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and it's like these physical cues help trick your brain into having some sort of control over the move you're about to execute or the challenge you're about to try and do.
But you need to make sure you're doing it intentionally, because in gymnastics there's something called the tumbler's twitch, and it's not a send ritual. It's something that like you're scared, so you start like doing a certain twitch because it's just kind of like this obsessive response. And I had that. For me, it was putting my hands into and out of my pockets, and doing. For me, it wasn't 3, 2, 1. There was a point where it was 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 3, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. And I kept on like having that little twitch before I went, and it was stopping me from being able to completely do it. Creating your own send ritual, this little thing you do right before you complete a move, doing that intentionally, it's a way of mastering that anxiety inducing stimulus that is that move that you're about to do. So you need to do it intentionally.
And I think a way to practice doing that intentionally is to exercise that same ritual, but for challenges that aren't so high level. So practicing it for challenges that might be very low level, but being able to consistently do that ritual and then execute almost perfectly a low level challenge, and then slowly raising the level of that challenge so that you associate the send ritual with the idea of fully committing to a challenge. So it's like slowly raising the bar, but at the same time pairing it with this ritual so that you get to a point where the minute you start doing this ritual, your brain's like, okay, it's go time. I know what I need to do. I'm just going to execute whatever it is I need to do. And I think that's a good way to build up that send ritual, because it's really hard just to try something on a high level challenge and then expect it to work. Like it's almost like you can't believe that it's going to work because you haven't done it before. So it's almost like laying the foundation of doing it.
For that belief.
And doing it for every other scenario that you can complete with like 90% accuracy, and then testing it out on the high level, challenges if you choose to go that route.
Because you do want to believe that you can do it. You don't want to just like delude yourself and just like step into your own little illusion where you can do anything you can visualize, because that can cause some consequences.
Another cool send ritual that I've played around with but I haven't done recently is just like if there's like a really quick short little song or like lullaby that you enjoy, and kind of like singing it to yourself in your head that like naturally calms you down. I think that's a really good thing to do before you do something scary. But at the same time, it's like being aware as to how you're singing it to yourself. Like if you're singing it to yourself and you're like rushing through it and you're saying la la la, la and you're nervous,
going through the motion,
and you're going through the motion and you're nervous at the same time, it's not going to work. You have to be there in that moment,
sink into it,
in that song, and hear it and have it and be aware that it's calming you down, and then going into the challenge.
For sure. When Sebastian Foucan was doing his tour in the United States, I went to go see him at the Brooklyn Zoo. And it was interesting. We were doing the whole little Q&A thing afterwards and just having a discussion. And he brought up how he uses neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which is basically the use of language and imagery to program your own psychology and program your psychophysiological responses to your environment. And one of the things that he does is he imagines just the image of Goku in his mind. And it just like, because Dragon Ball Z, I was never into it, but that's a very powerful show for a lot of people. Like I brought that up when we were training last night. The dude we were training with pulls up his sleeve and he's got a Dragon Ball Z tattoo. And he's like, dude, I'm the same way.
It's like, a lot of people look up to Goku, this imaginary character, and really believe in the strength that he has, that he exercises in the show.
It's like a deity. He's like Jesus. It's like someone going through a rosary before they move, like thinking of Goku.
And it's just imagining that powerful figure and then using that to like empower yourself, so that you're in a stronger place to do the challenge or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
It's all just part of mastering your own mind and for the sake of developing your spirit. Patrick Carbajal, is there anything else that you want to say on this subject?
No, I think we talked about a lot.
I think we covered our bases.
I think it was fun. This was my first time being on a podcast, and I was super stoked that you invited me out. And I thank you a ton for giving me this opportunity.
For sure, man. Thanks for being a part. And this weekend has been fun, just like hanging out and training. I think it's been cool. It's been a while since I've talked about parkour this much for so long, and it's been, especially because we think about our parkour practice in a very similar vein, I think. And I think it's important to explore this subject. And I hope that whoever's listening felt some kind of resonance with the things we've said today. And if you have anything to say, anyone listening, on how you've experienced parkour, as a spiritual practice, please let me know. This is something that one of the main things that I want to explore with this podcast is the intersection between movement and spirituality.
Yeah.
So Pat, thank you so much for doing this, man. Where can people find you?
Normally I try and post somewhat consistently on Instagram. Instagram handle is Pat_Carbajal. The last name spelled should be in the description, so you can find it there. I will try my best to post more on YouTube, but I've yet to kind of find some consistency in that. But hopefully in the future, in the near future, I will.
Cool, and they can find you at PPK Philly,
yep.
right?
Yeah, that is
go train with them, guys.
That is the home gym that I currently coach at. It's a very, very awesome place. Anyone that decides to come through, definitely hit me up, and I'll try my best to connect with you and train with you there.
Thanks again for listening to the Lifting the Iceberg podcast. You can find out more about Patrick by following him on Instagram at Pat_Carbajal or by following his team with The Venture Co. You can stay up to date on any new podcasts at liftingtheiceberg.com or by following Lifting the Iceberg on Facebook and Instagram. This podcast is available on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Thank you to Alexasfatty for designing the graphics for this podcast. You can find her at alexasfatty.com. Thank you to Kurusu for the soundtrack Stay With Me. You can find Kurusu on Spotify, YouTube, and Soundcloud.